Good morning, welcome to the Point. It was an unusually busy week for the middle of summer. The legislature was in session, both the House and Senate in Lansing, and they passed some significant legislation that may help bring jobs to the area. We talked to Governor Rick Snyder, who came to West Michigan to sign his budget, about that legislation, about the budget, and the first half of the year. Governor, you came to West Michigan to sign this budget. 7 times this budget, since you've been in office, has been done well before the scheduled deadline. Tell me about the significant parts of this to you.
Yeah, well, again, the timeliness is always important, Rick. It helps our partners so much. The other thing, though, is this is a really structurally sound, smart budget. And we're doing some great things. It's not just one thing, but in education, for example. We're going to have a record investment, essentially, in K-12. $1.9 billion more than when I took office. But where those dollars are going, we're increasing a big number for at-risk students, the people that need the most help. So those resources will be very helpful. We're actually doing an addition for high school students, something unique there, a new idea, because high school costs more to run than an elementary school. And being here at the Kent ISD Career Tech Center, a number of things on career tech education. Everything from capital equipment to counseling to helping support mechatronics programs. These are exciting things that are really creating an opportunity, not just about giving people an education, but setting them up for a career opportunity that's going to help grow all of Michigan.
Something you've talked about for the past few years is that growing number of jobs that are available in the state, but it's skills just like they teach here that many of the workforce, the folks in the workforce now don't have. So, I mean, part of the goal has to be to get those jobs filled.
Absolutely, because if you look at it, over the last 6 years, we're #1 in the Great Lakes states for private sector job creation, over 500,000. We're #6 in the country, but if you go to our website, mitalent.org, we have more openings today than when we had 11% unemployment. We've got over 100,000 openings today, and many of these are for good, well-paying jobs. And the issue is, we have people looking for work, we have companies needing employees, we need to make that skill connection happen. And again, that's why I was so proud to be here at the Kent ISD to say, these are exactly in that sweet spot that we need to be emphasizing.
If this was a football game, we'd be at halftime with the legislature because we're taking the summer break. Looking back over the last 6 months, there's been quite a bit of movement in the legislature, including the teacher retirement bills that I believe you just signed. And also something significant for you was the Good Jobs package of legislation. We won't go back and relive how that finally came about, but tell me why you think that may help as we go further, again, related to jobs.
Yeah, well, if you look at it, we've done great in terms of job creation in Michigan, but we have even more opportunity. We're now being recognized as one of the best places for employers to create opportunities because of the talent we have. Around the world, I'm seeing this on these trade missions and other places I go, Rick. We've got a lot of tools to help small business, because that's critically important, medium-sized business, but we were lacking an incentive tool for large job opportunities. And when I say large job opportunities, one that pay above average, and that would only be paid after people are actually working and be audited, and then I have a cap on the whole program. So this is a smart tool to add to our toolbox. To be open with you, when I go out and talk to companies, I don't start with the Good Jobs incentive. I'll start with our talented people, but to close the deal, we need something because every other state is usually giving far more than we would give, and they'll continue to, but at least we'll be more competitive.
When it comes to governance, there is give and take. You have always paid, I think, considerable respect to your partners in the legislature. This year, it seemed more apparent that the House and the Senate desperately wanted to do something about the teacher retirement system. When you and I were on the island, you made several cases that said that wasn't necessarily where you wanted to go. At least in the House, there was some resistance to getting the Good Jobs bill, but at the end of the day, both of those things get done. Is that just a matter of good old-fashioned horse trading and cooperation?
Well, that's the way it should work when people have different perspectives. You compromise. I mean, that's the old thing. Compromise is not a dirty word. In fact, if you look at the Good Jobs illustration, I'll say that was a bipartisan package, 71 votes in the House after all the issues we had. So it showed there was strong support across the board in many respects. So this is the kind of way that you would hope you'd see this happen in Washington and look at this process. So if you look at it, we've gotten good jobs done. We've done NIPSR's reform, the state and school system reforms. We just signed the budget.
And the governor says he has some significant plans for the second half of the year, too. We'll talk to him about those in an upcoming show. We also talked to 2 lawmakers this week as they take their mid-year break. First, Muskegon Democrat Terry Sabo. Representative, you've had 6 months to get used to what's going on in Lansing. So the question I always like to ask new representatives, what has developed that you didn't expect to develop since being elected?
You know, first of all, I really enjoy serving my constituents. I mean, that's one of the greatest joys that I have in this job. Now, I'm not necessarily excited and happy about some of the results that come out of that, but it's totally out of my control. But I like really being hands-on and serving the people of the Muskegon area. But probably the biggest thing that's really jumped out at me in this first 6 months is what the effects of term limits have on state government. You know, one of my colleagues really kind of summed it up best when he said, you know, as a renter of a house, which it feels like we're only renters because we know we're only going to be there a short time, that you're not necessarily concerned so much with the structure. You're more concerned about me and right now, whereas a homeowner is probably more concerned about the structure, the foundation, the roof. And I think that's a great way to equate what term limits is doing to the state of Michigan government.
I think that's an interesting way to put that, because term limits, as an observer, has changed fundamentally the way the process works in Lansing. Part of it is institutional memory, but from my perspective, outside looking in, and you can address this better than I, it's about relationships, because people don't know each other long enough to form those long relationships. And I should hasten to add, I understand that term limits was in some part a response to people being committee chairman for 20 years and having the grips of control for such a long period of time. They've dealt with that. For example, in the U.S. House, where you can only be chairman for 3 terms or 6 years. So some of those things could have been dealt with. But term limits is one of those kind of things that does have an impact even on the newest members.
Absolutely. You know, there's this me now attitude. What's in it for me right now? And not that I agree with that at all. I hate it. Because I really believe that we do have to build relationships, and I think that's a good thing in government, is building those long-term relationships. Now, just to give you an example of what I've endured, I don't know if I was even on the job for a month, and I had people coming after me wanting me to run for what's going to be an open Senate seat in my district. And first of all, I will flat out say, no, I'm not going to do that, because you know, somebody has went out and purchased my name on the internet in order to run this fake news of you know, me trying to, you know, position myself to run, and that's not the case. But that's an example of what's going on, is that everything is about me, everything is about right now, all short term. There is no long-term relationships being built, and I don't think that's a good thing.
Let's talk a little bit about legislation, because over in the House this year, there was an attempt right out of the blocks by Republicans to reduce income taxes. Well, first they wanted to do away with the income tax altogether over a 40-year period. And then the idea was to roll back to 3.9%, which in fairness had been suggested would happen when it was raised back in those dire days back in the mid-2000s. None of that happened. They couldn't get the votes for it. Fast forward to this week, when you had a rare July session day and actually had business on the docket, and a tax incentive was passed that would take money from newly created jobs, and half of the income tax collected would actually go to the people that created those jobs, something that some conservatives, including the Speaker of the House, totally opposed to. Nonetheless, he let the bill run, voted against it, and it passed with over 70 votes. Tell me about the juxtaposition of those two things. On one hand, cutting taxes across the board that failed. On the other hand, very targeted tax incentives for big companies.
Well, first of all, I voted no to eliminate that income tax. I don't think now is the time. You know, we have crumbling roads, we have infrastructure that's falling down around us. We need to continue to invest in Michigan in the long term. And by cutting those income taxes, which would really amount to a very small amount for the middle class families like myself, but it would really be a big cut for those wealthiest in Michigan. And I didn't think it was a good thing at the time, and I still don't believe it was a good thing to do such a cut. But now on the flip side, with yesterday's action that we passed, and I voted for the Good Jobs for Michigan proposal, was that we're going to be creating now, or creating the opportunity to have those jobs created. Now this is going to be not just regular jobs. These are certain jobs that are going to be paying at the same rate or more as what the regional wage is, the average regional wage. And I think that's something that we really need to look at. Now, the difference between the two, with the income tax cut, that's money that was already coming into the state of Michigan government, money that we're using now. That was going to be money that was going to be taken away. With this good jobs proposal, these are going to be jobs that are going to be created that potentially we would have never had to begin with. And it was something that we had to do in order to stay in touch with the workforce and those that want to continue to build their businesses, because their states around us are going to these tax incentives, and really the whole world. We're competing against the whole world. So if we're going to compete, let's make sure we're on equal ground.
You're talking about jobs that on average will pay between $20 and $25 an hour.
That's correct.
So these are not low-paying jobs. There are safeguards to suggest that you have to not just create these jobs, but you have to maintain them. And as one member put it to me yesterday, would you rather have half of something or all of nothing? In other words, the state will still get half of the tax revenue from these jobs for that 5 or 10 year period, and thereafter presumably all of it. Or you don't get the jobs at all, and so the tax base is never created. So I assume that's the premise for people who supported the bill.
That's correct. You know, Rick, to me, that's what it's all about, is jobs. We've got to figure out how to put people to work in Michigan, not for some of these lower paying jobs, but good paying jobs that can support their families. And I think this is a good opportunity to at least put out there to try to lure some of these jobs into Michigan. And I want to really go back to what you mentioned about the safeguards. You know, we have a cutoff date of the end of 2019. So those in the legislature, and hopefully it's going to be me, are going to be able to go back and look at this and say, is this working or is it not? If it's working, then let's continue it, potentially. If it's not, then let's cut it off. So those safeguards are built in. I think that's a good thing. And also, maybe the number one thing is that once those jobs are created, once a potential company reaches that threshold of these new jobs, not current jobs, but new jobs, they're going to get that tax break. Now, they're going to have to continue those jobs at those wages for as long as the agreement is, because once they don't abide by that tax break's gone. So they have to continue these jobs for the long term.
Guys like me very often talk about the partisan divide in Lansing, and I bring this up because yesterday, or as we tape this will air on Sunday, but on Wednesday, the vote was bipartisan and overwhelming, 71 votes, I think, in favor of, despite the fact, as I point out, the Speaker of the House didn't support it, but he let the bill run anyway. And the fact is that many pieces of legislation in the House do pass in a bipartisan way. It is only on those most contentious issues where we see that real divide, isn't it?
That's correct. You know, and that's one of the things that I really liked about what happened with this bill package, was that, you know, first of all, the Republicans did not have enough votes to do this. The Democrats in the House stepped forward because we know how important it is to have jobs in Michigan and provide these opportunities. So when we looked at this whole thing, we said this is something that we have to do, or at least a majority of. I'll say just for me, anyways. That's what I wanted to do because I thought it was that important. But I thought that it was really important that we were actually brought to the table to offer amendments, some amendments that were accepted on this package in order to make it work for everybody. And how often do you see a bill package of this magnitude that passes, that has the support of many, many Republicans, many Democrats, organized labor, business leaders? I mean, those are all areas that, as you say, are typically divided in a partisan way, but in this case, they all came together because they know what was best for Michigan.
When we come back, you'll hear the view from the other side of the aisle with Republican Representative Chris Afendoulis. Welcome back to the Point. If the legislative session was a football game, this would be halftime. Members won't be back until September, but how have things gone so far? You just heard from the Democratic side of the aisle. Now, Republican Chris Afendoulis from Kent County gives us his take. Representative, let's start with an unusual session day earlier this week. And generally speaking, July and August are when members are back in the district and they're dealing with constituents and a number of other things. Traditionally, under this administration, the budget has been done, and all of that is true. But there was a big issue that the governor was very anxious to get taken care of, and it was called good jobs. Speaker of the House was not in favor of it. In fact, pulled the vote after some of us thought it might be voted on near the end of the regular session. But you came back in July. The vote went up. Tell me about that process, because it's one of the, not the only time, one of the few times I can remember a Speaker of the House allowing a bill to go to the floor, and he voted against it.
Yeah, it is interesting, and a number of the leadership as well voted against it. I think when you look back on June 20, I think there was some angst that the governor was out of the country, and that he did not, that he had purportedly made a deal with Democrats on certain votes and was giving up things that might jeopardize Republican priorities for the balance of the legislative session. I think once the Speaker and the governor got on the same page, and I believe they had a meeting the day before our session day, and they hashed it out. Other leadership members were there, and the governor assured them that no, he was not going to, take anything off the table per se, and that I think then we could move forward with a vote. But back to your original point of it, why would a vote be put up that the Speaker wouldn't support? The Speaker said on a number of occasions that he knew that a majority of the caucus did want the bill to pass, and I think he felt he had to give them an opportunity to go ahead and vote on that. And then obviously the votes were there. I think it passed with 71 or so votes compared to, out of 108 sitting members or members who were there. Yesterday we had a couple absences. But so I think he felt that, hey, they want to vote for it, I'm going to let them vote for it, but I'm going to go on record as saying that it's not necessarily good policy. I think that's a matter of debate, obviously. Some people think these are not good policies. Some people think they are. I happen to vote yes. I think that the key thing to me is jobs. That's what people, if we're going to have incentive programs, this has got a cap on it. It's got a sunset date on it, 15 programs max per year, agreements. So if it doesn't work, we have a short-term incentive, but I think it will. I think it will help.
Talk a little bit about what those of you who supported this bill say are safeguards, because as has been the case with many incentives, and I think it sometimes gets lost in the mix, is you don't get the incentive unless you have performance, unless you create the jobs.
Correct.
Now, we have seen in some cases where jobs are created and then they go away. In this particular case, there is kind of a proof of performance clause that says you can't just create them and then they go away. You got to keep them to get the incentive.
That's correct, and it's over a 10-year period. And so, and they have to be new jobs. And this is the key. I think what we've found is that we're the only state, and one of only 2 states now, that have a corporate income tax and then no business incentives to bring larger size companies in. It's Michigan and Alaska are the only 2. So I think we've put in some safeguards here. This is not the mega program from 2008 through 11. Clearly not. And it's not even comparable to that. That was an open-ended policy that really has, costs, it's reduces revenue by about $600 million a year. That's what it's costing the state treasury. Again, when you say that, though, you say, well, what are the other revenues that the state gets because we have those things in place? So it's very hard to determine those things. But I think in this case, there are safeguards in place. Again, it's a cap of $200 million on the total program, sunsets by December 31 of 2019, and only 15 projects a year.
When you look at the program overall, it is fair to say that the revenue that would be captured by these companies is revenue that otherwise would have gone to the state. So that would be true. On the other hand, the revenue that remains that goes to the state is revenue that otherwise wouldn't go unless the jobs are created. So, and one of your colleagues over on the Democratic side actually had a very valid point saying, look, I get both sides of this. I can argue this both ways, but at the end of the day, paraphrasing, we've got to do something about jobs, so let's give it a shot. There seemed to be some of that in the chamber as well. People who may not have been 100% sure this would work, but felt like those safeguards that you talked about were enough to protect the state if it didn't. And if it does work, then everybody would be a winner on the other end.
I think you can always have the risk to say, well, if someone brings in a new job, new quote unquote, if someone just leaves another job and goes to that, then that income tax they were paying is forfeited by the state. So it's not a net gain, it's a net loss. However, I think what we're going to have to see in Michigan is some, and what I think the goal should be, is growing our population and getting people to move to Michigan, because we have an acute labor shortage right now. I think there's probably 80 or 90,000 open jobs, and a lot more people are retiring than entering the workforce. And I think we all know Michigan's a great place to live. When people get here, they rarely leave unless they don't have a job. So if you have some good jobs, people are going to come for those jobs. So I think it helps also induce people to come say, hey, there are jobs in Michigan, and they're good jobs, and it's a great place to live.
One of the things that hinders that job overall performance is that many of those jobs that are open out there, and if you go to the Michigan job site, they're skilled trades jobs. And it's something the governor has talked about, and you and I have talked about it. There are people who just haven't been trained to do some of those jobs. And again, these are not low-wage jobs. Like the jobs we're talking about in this jobs plan, you're looking at jobs that pay above the regional average.
Right.
So the same could be said for some of those jobs that are out there right now. What kind of progress, I know there's some money in the budget that was just passed that deals with that, but what kind of progress from a state level are you seeing when it comes to getting people trained to take some of those jobs that are available?
So some of the things we've done obviously is increasing funding for these programs, for skilled trades programs. The other thing is making some adjustments to what can be used as a credit toward high school graduation, moving away from necessarily what is more college prep classes to giving credit for classes that would be more toward vocational ed. And so I think that those are important steps we're taking, but clearly these are really good paying jobs in the skilled trades. And I think we just need to tell young people that, hey, this is an option for you. College, 4-year degree, a baccalaureate degree is not for everyone. An associate degree or a certification. So continuing to support these programs for certificates and for associate degrees that focus on skilled trades, because these are really good paying jobs that will provide a good middle class income for a family.
Talk to me quickly in the moments we have left about the session so far. You've been in Lansing long enough to kind of get the general lay of the land, though this year seems to be a little bit different.
Yeah, it was different. Obviously, we had the tax vote, which was put up and failed. And then I think I'm really pleased with the MIPSR's, the teacher's pension reform. I think it's really great for new teachers and teachers that are currently in the program. In the budget, we saved some money in areas and put another $250 million into shoring up the unfunded liability and the pensions through the budget process, put another $150 million away in the rainy day fund, which is now approaching, I think, $800 to $900 million, which is very important as bond agencies and creditors look at the creditworthiness and the fiscal soundness of the state. So those are important things, and I think this Good Jobs program was a good accomplishment. So yeah, it has been a little different than my first term in office. However, I think we've got some good accomplishments to point to.
So about the time that school starts, the legislature will head back to Lansing. So will we, to keep you updated on what's happening there. We're back with more To the Point. There is much more going on in the world of politics already. The race for governor is heating up. You'll be hearing from more of those candidates right here. And one of your U.S. congressmen will be my guest next Sunday as well, when you join us Sunday morning at 10 o'clock on Wood TV 8 for To the Point.